Hi there and welcome to Unit 4, Teaching Strategies for Promoting Creativity and Problem Solving. The awesome thing now is we start to get down to the nitty-gritty of how to teach in the classroom. In this unit, we're going to compare the practice of working in small groups as opposed to large groups with regard to methods supporting collaboration and problem solving. We're going to discuss the ultimate group size. So you better think about that in advance. What is your ultimate group size? We're going to identify the importance of problem solving, discuss potential shortfalls, and determine the salient features of inquiry-based learning. We're also going to look at the differences between inquiry-based learning and problem-based learning. Then we're going to discuss the benefits of drama and dance as a means of stimulating creativity. And finally, the advantages of role play for encouraging creative problem solving. Right, so let's dive on in to theme 1, the benefits of working in groups. By the end of this theme, you should be able to compare the practice of working in small groups as opposed to larger groups, with regard to methods supporting collaboration and problem solving, and also discussing your ultimate group size. The reading for this theme is Chapter 8 of PM1. By this time, I know that you've got loads of experience in using group work. Well, I'm not sure how much experience you've got about it, but I know you've had lots of it included in some of the modules that you've done so far in your degree. Using small group work is a major step in passing control of learning from the teacher to the learners. For some lessons, your principal role becomes the monitor rather than the director of learning. By making these changes, you can enable students to engage more deeply with the issues that they are investigating and to benefit from direct interaction with one another. You can use small group work for whole lessons or just parts of lessons, but in either case, it should be carefully planned and closely supervised. Chapter 8 of your textbook highlights some factors that you should consider when using group work and identifies some specific teacher behaviors that are frequently associated with it. Group work happens when you ask 2 or more learners to work together. There are many variations to this basic strategy, and each has its particular advantages, although a few observational studies claim to have identified the most effective small group teaching practices for particular subjects or lesson content. The distinguishing feature of group work is that learners work together without direct intervention by the teacher, well, for at least a little bit of the time. This doesn't mean that the learners are left to their own devices or to learn whatever they like. It means that you have to put in place the structure, the learning environment that the learners can use to interact productively under your indirect guidance as they work towards achieving particular learning outcomes. There are 2 main types of group work that are described in your textbook. The first is a direct modification of the whole class discussion strategy. The main difference here is that the discussion takes place in small groups. This approach to group work is used in the same general way that you might use a whole class discussion. Typically, this will fit the curriculum areas where discussions about different points of view will actually assist learners in developing a deeper understanding. For example, a life skills lesson where the teacher might want the children to explore the different ways that their religions celebrate their New Year's. By using small group discussion rather than whole class discussion in these situations, there's more opportunity for individual learners to voice their opinions, even though they may be heard by fewer learners. When small group discussions are used in this way, it's common to conclude the lesson with some form of sharing or debriefing that involves the whole class. The second approach to small group work I've named the teamwork approach. This is used for curriculum areas or topics where learners can benefit from working together and sharing their ideas, but where they're not simply discussing different points of view about something. For example, in a science lesson, the children can work together in small groups to solve a problem or to conduct an experiment. This type of work allows students to share the learning tasks, to observe the outcomes of one another's actions, and jointly arrive at conclusions. These two approaches to small group work obviously require some different approaches to planning, organization, and implementation. But the success of either approach often depends on many of the factors that help make a whole class discussion successful. Some of these factors include a clear focus on learning, preparation of and by the learners, a clear set of guidelines for the children, careful management of the learning environment, direction, but not intrusion or interference by the teacher, willing participation by all learners, monitoring and feedback by the teacher, careful time management by the teacher and the learners, and a teacher-directed conclusion to the lesson. I would like to add in here that often the first time we try to do group work with children, we don't succeed. It's something that really takes practice, but once you do get it right, it can be amazing. There are many situations in which you might choose to have students work collaboratively. However, there is little point in using group work unless it's likely to produce some desired outcomes that cannot simply be achieved through whole class instruction. In the same way, there's also not much point engaging students in group work when they could just as readily achieve the outcomes working by themselves. So why go to all this trouble? Well, group work can have both social and academic benefits. In fact, there are so many benefits that I'm not going to go through all of them. Please go through pages 204 and 205 of PM1 to fully grasp the benefits of using group work in the right situation. There are just a few factors that I'd like to point out here. I love the fact that it reconstructs children's understanding of a subject. It helps them to verbalize both their ideas and their feelings. And because they have to communicate clearly, it actually enhances metacognition. And I'm sure you know by now that metacognition is one of my favorite words. The other thing that I like about it is that the complex problems actually create opportunities for us as teachers to assess things like initiative, creativity, flexibility, tolerance, and communication. There are not very many things that allow us to assess those types of skills. I also love the fact that the fun factor increases children's motivation and active participation. But you do still need to take into account the preferences of your children. Those who need structure may find that they experience a feeling of uncertainty, while those who are comfortable with exploring different points of view are happy to work with unstructured group work. Now that we've covered some of the benefits, let's focus on the limitations of group work. Firstly, students have to learn how to learn in this environment. Something that may not be easy for learners who are accustomed to teacher-directed methods of instruction. In particular, learners who come from cultures where learning is usually teacher-directed may have difficulty in changing the expectations and concept of learning. Some learners find group work discomforting. This is most likely to occur with students who have high levels of social anxiety and low levels of sociability and possibly low levels of metacognitive awareness as well. Some learners may initially find it difficult to be accepted as group members, possibly because they're unpopular or different in some way from the rest of the members of the group. This alienation can actually inhibit their learning. Some learners may not be able to contribute productively to the group effort, perhaps because they don't have the necessary prior knowledge. They might simply copy information or answers from the rest of the group members and never really understand the concept or the problem that they're trying to work on. In order to understand and learn, some students need to progress more slowly while solving problems or doing group tasks, such as science experiments. If some members of a group try to progress too quickly, the work might get done without every learner in the group understanding what is going on. High ability learners may lose their incentive to learn when placed with mixed ability groups. Unless you monitor the learning interaction in each group, some learners may waste time discussing irrelevant issues, and some students may be reluctant to do their fair share of the group work, and then they just rely on one child to do it all. Some teachers feel uneasy about passing that control over to learners. Consequently, they may structure the group work so tightly that it restricts the spontaneity that should be a key feature of group work. The physical arrangement of many classrooms is not suitable for small group work. To be effective, the groups must be able to function without interfering with one another. Some learners may prefer direct instruction and aren't happy when the teacher asks them to teach themselves. If it's going to be used effectively, group work requires a lot of preparation, probably more than an equivalent lesson delivered by direct instruction. If group work is to play a major part of your classroom instruction, formal assessment of students' learning can cause problems. It is often difficult to assess individual learners fairly, and some students can feel uneasy about being judged on the basis of the group effort. It's going to be up to you now to actually find solutions to these difficulties. How can we work around the limitations? Are the benefits sufficient to outweigh the limitations? So here's the question. When should we use group work and when shouldn't we? So they suggest that you use it if you aim to encourage social skills while learning academic content. Also, that learners should share their... We also want to use group work if learners should share their multiple perspectives through discussion and debate. If you want to work with small groups of learners while the others are actively involved in their own groups and with their own tasks, then group work's a good way to go. And then finally, if the task is too big for one person to do on its own, then it makes a really good task as a group work task. On the other hand, they suggest that we don't use group work when whole class instruction would actually be more effective. When the learners don't have sufficient background knowledge to work productively and to be able to contribute effectively. And also, if there's not enough time for learners to investigate, discuss, and think about the things that you want them to learn. On your screen, you will see the steps that are recommended in order to effectively plan for group work. You can read more about this on page 227. The steps go: 1. Plan well ahead. 2. Prepare your learners for the group work. 3. Prepare or gather resource material. 4. Develop detailed guidelines for learners. And 5. Introduce the issue. The following is kind of a program that works really well for the lessons. At the start of the lesson, inform learners of the outcomes that they're going to achieve and remind them that they will be working in their previously arranged groups. Remind them also of the arrangements, such as how much time they have and how their learning is going to be assessed. If necessary, revise briefly the critical information that the learners need for their group work activities. Under your guidance, the learners form their groups, collect their necessary materials, and start working. Don't take too much time over this, otherwise your learners can lose interest and become a little bit otherwise and start to amuse themselves, which can be a tad distracting. The first job of the group will be to elect the group's leader and recorder. Alternatively, you can nominate them in advance. The main task of the leader is to provide the directions necessary for the group to keep working and keep their members on task. The learners then get on with their discussions following the guidelines that you've given them. You're going to move around at this stage to ensure that they maintain an appropriate degree of order. You can attend to any difficulties that arrive, gain feedback on learner progress, and help the groups to keep on track. You're going to encourage learners to think more deeply about the things that they're learning about. This is also an opportunity for you to get to know your individual learners better and to reinforce the message that you're there as a resource to help the students learn. You must try to keep all the students engaged actively in learning, and this means that the group tasks must be interesting and appropriately difficult, and that provision must be made for the fact that groups are going to work at different rates. One of your important functions is to monitor the group work and gather evaluative data about how your learners are thinking and acting. You need to identify those things that appear to be helping students to learn, and also those things that appear to be creating barriers to learning. You can use this information later to modify the task or the materials so that learning can progress more effectively next time the students are involved in group work. Your lecturer will now guide you through further discussions and activities on this theme.